It was Christmas Eve, and the blizzard outside the pristine Lake Tahoe Lodge was nothing compared to the chill inside. My sister Jessica, the family's eternal golden child, was loudly holding court about my lack of organization. "Honestly, Ashley," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "I still haven't received your RSVP for my wedding. It's next month. How hard is it to mail a card?" I didn't look up from my plate. I calmly sliced my ham and dropped the bomb. "I didn't RSVP because I've been married for a year." The silence was instantaneous. When my mother gasped and claimed they knew nothing, I simply picked up the remote control. "Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply stood up, walked over to the 85-inch television mounted above the stone fireplace, and tapped the cast icon on my phone. The screen flickered from a festive Yule log loop to the stark, blue and white interface of the lodge's smart home security system. The room went dead silent, the kind of silence that usually precedes a car crash. My father, Gregory, opened his mouth to ask what I was doing, but I silenced him with a single raised hand. I wasn't a daughter seeking approval anymore. I was a systems architect running a diagnostic on a failed network. "You claim you never received them," I said, my voice flat and clinical. "Let's review the data." On the screen, I pulled up the delivery logs from the smart gate. I scrolled back to November 3rd. The system logs were precise, unfeeling, and irrefutable. 10:14 a.m. Priority package delivery scanned. Addressed to Gregory, Susan, and Jessica. Gate opened. Delivery completed. I looked at my mother, Susan. Her face was already draining of color, her eyes darting nervously toward Jessica. But I wasn't done. Logs were one thing. High-definition video was another. I tapped the file labeled Front Entry, November 3rd. The video began to play. The resolution was crystal clear, capturing every snowflake drifting past the lens. In the footage, the delivery driver walked up the steps, placed a thick, cream-colored stack of envelopes on the welcome mat, and rang the bell. Moments later, the heavy oak door opened. Jessica stepped out. She was wearing her signature cashmere lounge set, holding a steaming mug of coffee. She looked down at the mail. On the massive screen, we all watched her pick up the stack. She paused, thumbing through the top envelope, the one with the gold calligraphy I had paid $12,000 for. In the video, she didn't take them inside. She didn't call out to Mom or Dad. Instead, she looked over her shoulder, checking the empty hallway behind her, and then walked directly to the large, bear-proof trash bin at the edge of the porch. With a flick of her wrist that looked practiced, almost casual, she dropped the entire stack into the bin. Then she dusted her hands off, as if clearing away a system error, and went back inside. The video ended. The screen went black. For 10 seconds, the only sound in the room was the crackling of the actual fire and the howling wind outside. Jessica sat frozen, her fork hovering halfway to her mouth, looking like a deer caught in the high beams of a semi-truck. My father looked from the screen to his favorite daughter, his expression fracturing. I disconnected my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. It felt heavy, like a weapon I had finally discharged. "You didn't lose them," I said, looking Jessica dead in the eye. "You trashed them." The silence in the room stretched thin, like a rubber band about to snap. But inside my head, the noise was deafening, the sound of a ledger finally balancing out. For years, I had been the silent investor in the entity known as the family. They saw the result, the vacations, the clothes. This very lodge, but they never looked for the receipt. I looked at my parents, Gregory and Susan, sitting there in shock. They didn't know that 3 years ago, when their investments failed, I was the one who quietly wired $50,000 to cover their property taxes. I did it anonymously through a holding company because I knew my father's pride was more fragile than his finances. Then there was Jessica, my influencer sister. She thought her lifestyle was funded by brand deals. She didn't know that I was the one who paid off her $30,000 credit card debt when she was between agencies. I had treated my family like a failing startup I was desperately trying to save, pouring capital into a black hole, hoping for a return on investment that never came. That return was supposed to be love, or at least, respect. For a long time, I wondered why I let it happen. Why did I sign the checks? Why did I let them speak over me at every dinner? It is the trap of normalizing cruelty. When you are raised in a house where you are the designated listener and everyone else is the speaker, you start to believe that your silence is a virtue. You convince yourself that enduring pain without complaint makes you strong rather than just exploited. I thought my passivity was a peace offering. I didn't realize I was just making it easier for them to erase me. But the biggest secret wasn't the debts I paid, it was the wealth I kept. They didn't know about my software company. They didn't know about the acquisition last year that netted me $2 million. I hid it because I knew if they found out, I wouldn't just be the daughter anymore. I would be the bank. The $12,000 I spent on those custom invitations, the ones Jessica tossed in the trash like junk mail, wasn't just paper. It was my final attempt at a merger. It was me saying, I am successful. I am happy. Please come celebrate me. And Jessica didn't just reject it. She deleted it. I looked at Tyler, standing quietly by the door. He knew everything. He knew the cost of every tear and every dollar. He was the only one who didn't need my money to love me. Standing there, watching my mother's face twist into that familiar mix of victimhood and denial, I realized the ledger was finally full. I had overpaid for my place at this table for decades, and tonight, I was closing the account. The shock in the room lasted for maybe 10 seconds before it curdled into something uglier. My father, Gregory, was the first to attack. Ashley, honestly, he huffed, his face flushing red in the firelight. You are ruining Christmas with these petty grievances. It's a holiday. Can't you just let it go? He waved his hand dismissively, as if the video evidence on the massive screen was just a minor inconvenience, like spilled wine. Then my mother started to cry. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were the practiced, weaponized tears of a martyr. I can't believe you're trying to humiliate your sister like this, she sobbed, clutching a napkin to her chest. She's under so much pressure with the wedding. You're just jealous because it's her turn to shine. Jessica, realizing the video left her no room to deny the act, pivoted instantly to victimhood. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. I threw them away because I knew you were doing this on purpose, she shouted, standing up and pointing a manicured finger at me. You scheduled your little secret marriage just to upstage my engagement. You sent those fancy invitations just to rub it in my face that you have money now. I was protecting my mental health. She wasn't done. Emboldened by our parents' silence, she played her trump card. Besides, I've already spent my entire wedding budget. Every cent of the $150,000 is gone. The venue, the flowers, the photographer, it's all booked. And now, because you caused this huge scene and upset everyone, the least you can do is pay for the lodge rental for the wedding weekend. It's only fair. She crossed her arms, waiting for me to cave, to apologize, to pull out my checkbook like I always did. They didn't just want forgiveness. They wanted a deposit. Scanning their faces, indignant, manipulative, entitled, I realized the data set was complete. There were no more variables to test. A strange calm washed over me, the kind that comes when a complex system finally stabilizes. It wasn't peace. It was the total absence of hope. And without hope, there was no more fear. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them money, and I certainly didn't owe them a venue. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply turned to Tyler, who had been standing silently by the door like a sentinel. I gave him a small nod. He understood immediately. He grabbed my coat from the rack and held it out. As I slipped my arms into the sleeves, I pulled out my phone again. You want me to pay for the venue? I asked, my thumb hovering over the banking app. That's interesting, because technically, I already am. I opened the Property Management tab and tapped on the deed for the Lake Tahoe Lodge. You see, I said, turning the screen to face them once more. Mom, Dad, you don't own this lodge. You never did. When you bought it 5 years ago, your credit was shot. I bought it through my holding company. I've been letting you stay here, rent-free, as a tax write-off. The color drained from my father's face so fast he looked like a ghost. That's a lie, he sputtered, but his voice was thin. It's public record, I countered. And since you've decided to evict me from the family, I'm returning the favor. I tapped the button labeled Terminate Lease. A confirmation window popped up. I hit yes. Then I opened the smart home app. I just sent a reset command to the locks. The codes will change in exactly 1 hour. That gives you 60 minutes to pack your bags and get out of my house. Jessica let out a shrill laugh. You can't do that. It's Christmas Eve. It's a blizzard. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw only a stranger wearing my sister's face. It's not a family dispute anymore, Jessica, I said, buttoning my coat. It's a property management issue. And unlike you, I have the receipts. The power in the room shifted so violently I could almost feel the air pressure drop. They weren't just guests anymore. They were trespassers. The room was a frenzy of chaos as my family scrambled to pack their bags, the 60-minute timer ticking down in their heads like a bomb. My mother was sobbing into a suitcase, stuffing sweaters in haphazardly. My father was pacing, muttering about lawsuits and ungrateful children. But Jessica was still standing by the fireplace, staring at the blank TV screen where her crimes had just been broadcast. She wasn't packing. She was trembling. You can't kick us out, she whispered, her voice shaking. Where are we supposed to go? The roads are closed. I pulled the final piece of evidence from my pocket, the physical envelopes I had recovered from the trash bin that day. I held one up to the firelight. You figured out how to make me disappear, didn't you? I asked softly. I turned the envelope over. There, stamped in red ink right next to my name, were the words, Addressee. Deceased. The room went dead silent again. My mother stopped crying. My father stopped pacing. They stared at the envelope in my hand, then at Jessica. You told the post office I was dead, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. You didn't just throw them away. You tried to legally erase me so no one would ask questions. That's federal mail fraud, Jessica. That's a felony. Jessica crumbled. She didn't cry like a victim this time. She broke down like a child caught in a lie too big to fix. I had to, she wailed, sinking to the floor. If you came to the wedding, everyone would see you. They'd see how successful you are, how happy you are, and I'd just be. She looked up at me, mascara running down her face, the golden child facade completely shattered. I just wanted one day where I was the special one. Is that so wrong? I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a monster. I saw a fragile, terrified girl standing on a pedestal made of sand. She existed only through validation. Without the applause, without the perfect image, she was nothing. And without the pedestal I had paid for, she fell. It's not wrong to want to be special, I said, my voice quiet, but destroying someone else to build yourself up? That's not special, Jessica. That's pathetic. I dropped the envelope on the coffee table. I'm not your banker anymore. I'm not your punching bag. And I'm certainly not your ghost. I turned to Tyler. Let's go. We walked out into the blizzard, the wind howling around us. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel the cold. I felt light. Tyler held my hand tightly as we navigated the snowy steps to our SUV. Behind us, the lodge was a glowing box of panic and regret, but it was already fading in the rearview mirror. The drive down the mountain was treacherous, the snow coming down in thick sheets, but the silence inside the car was peaceful. It wasn't the heavy, loaded silence of my family dinners. It was the comfortable silence of two people who didn't need words to understand each other. We stopped at a small, 24-hour diner at the base of the mountain. It was empty, except for a trucker dozing in a booth and a waitress who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. We slid into a vinyl booth and ordered 2 slices of cherry pie and black coffee. It wasn't a fancy Christmas dinner. There was no prime rib, no expensive wine, no performative toasts. But it was honest, and it was ours. As I took the first bite of pie, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my banking app, lease termination processed. Then another from the smart home system. Access codes reset. And finally, a barrage of texts from unknown numbers, my family, trying to reach me from burner phones. I didn't read them. I opened my settings and blocked every single number. Then I set the phone face down on the table. I looked across the booth at Tyler. He was watching me with a small, proud smile. "Merry Christmas," he said softly. "Merry Christmas," I replied. And I realized then that I hadn't left my family back at the lodge. I had brought my real family with me. The family I chose. The family that chose me back. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of coffee and cheap diner syrup, and finally, truly, exhaled. The weight was gone. If you've ever had to build your own table because the one you were born at didn't have a seat for you, share this story. You are not alone.